Greetings, my name is Egon Cholakian. Today I will reveal what the interdisciplinary team at ALLATRA has been working on for the past 30 years. Something that has remained unknown to the global scientific community and to society at large. We believe the time has come for people to learn the truth about this research, which is decades ahead of any existing developments. Today you will come to understand the profound significance and vital importance of ALLATRA's work for every person on this planet. The world must finally see the complete picture of what is happening to our planet's climate, what the true causes are behind the escalating destabilization and climate anomalies, and how all of this is interconnected with atmospheric processes, ecological systems, and global geodynamic changes. What we are talking about are deep causal relationships that still remain outside the field of view for most people, including the scientific community. Today, I will do my very best to explain everything as clearly as possible so that every person, regardless of their background or profession, can understand it. I will present it gradually, step by step, clearly and coherently, so that everyone understands precisely what is happening in the world and what lies ahead if we do not take responsibility into our own hands. In the course of this address, I will explain the physical mechanism by which deep geophysical processes influence the state of the atmosphere and contribute to the increasing frequency of atmospheric anomalies, including such a dangerous phenomenon as turbulence. I will substantiate why traditional methods of forecasting turbulence are becoming less effective. I will also outline the potential consequences for flight safety in the near future. Additionally, I will address one of the most critical yet still underestimated factors, one that is silently destroying the human body from within and eroding the planet's ecosystem, introducing a catastrophic imbalance. ALLATRA scientists have dedicated 20 years of research to this factor and have uncovered what modern science has yet to recognize. I am speaking about nanoplastic, its properties, some of which you may not even be aware of. This is no longer a matter of scientific curiosity. It is a shared crisis and a shared responsibility. No one is exempt from its consequences. We are all participants in what is happening to our planet. The sooner humanity understands what ALLATRA has been warning about for 2 decades, the greater our chances of changing the trajectory and preserving life on Earth. Why am I raising this issue with such urgency? Because the current catastrophic trends will inevitably continue unless decisive intervention is made. What awaits humanity in the near future? You will hear from me shortly. Let's start with a well-known atmospheric phenomenon today, turbulence. Today's topic concerns every one of us without exception. However, those who travel by air regularly have likely been the first to notice a troubling trend. Turbulence is no longer a rare occurrence. Official statistics confirm these observations. Flights are indeed becoming increasingly turbulent. But why? Familiar air routes are turning into high-risk zones, and the root cause lies much deeper than is commonly believed. However, let's begin with the consequences, the dangerous trends in aviation that have already become impossible to ignore. In late July 2025, just about 2 weeks ago, the BBC published an article titled, "Why Plane Turbulence is Becoming More Frequent and More Severe." The article highlights exactly what we at ALLATRA have long been warning the global public about. Unfortunately, many are only now beginning to grasp the reality of what we've been saying. According to the BBC article, airline passengers are increasingly encountering a growing problem: more frequent and more intense turbulence during flights. Forecasts indicate that the frequency and duration of turbulence could double or even triple in the coming decades. The consequences of this trend are being felt by both passengers and airlines. In 2023, 40% of serious injuries on board aircraft were directly related to turbulence. Airlines are incurring substantial financial losses, ranging from $200,000 to $1.9 million per year. They are being forced to alter flight paths, which lead to increased fuel consumption. It is well known in the scientific community that turbulence can arise from a variety of causes. There is a convective turbulence, triggered by clouds and thunderstorms, orographic turbulence, caused by mountainous terrain, and a phenomenon known as clear air turbulence. As the name would suggest, this type of turbulence occurs in seemingly clear skies and is undetected by onboard sensors. According to the BBC article, clear air turbulence is typically caused by sudden shifts in wind speed or direction. However, this explanation fails to account for a critical aspect: why aircraft, when caught in clear air turbulence, can suddenly drop dozens of meters within seconds. A striking example occurred on May 20th, 2024, when a Boeing 777 operated by Singapore Airlines encountered sudden clear air turbulence over Myanmar while en route from London to Singapore. The aircraft lost 178 feet, approximately 54 meters, of altitude in just 4.6 seconds. Passengers who were not wearing seatbelts were violently thrown into the ceiling and aisles. One person even lost their life, marking the first fatality due to turbulence in the past 27 years. Research published in June 2023 reveals that over the North Atlantic, the most severe instances of clear air turbulence occurred 55% more frequently in 2020 than in 1979. And yet, despite the steadily increasing frequency and intensity of turbulence, so-called experts continue to assure us that it is more of a nuisance than a serious safety concern. I quote from the BBC article, "But even if turbulence becomes more frequent and severe, experts say there is no cause for concern." Oh, what a bitter, short-sighted delusion that is. Turbulence, especially clear air turbulence, is a very real cause for concern, and it is precisely the lack of understanding of its underlying mechanisms that leads to such reckless conclusions. As early as April 2023, prior to release of the aforementioned study on the rising trends in clear air turbulence, ALLATRA, in collaboration with our partner project, Creative Society, held a forum entitled Global Crisis: There is a Way Out. Therein, we publicly outlined the trends and projections for the intensification of this phenomena. Moreover, we presented the specific mechanism by which dangerous episodes of clear air turbulence occur, incidents that have, in fact, ended in aircraft crashes. Please take a look at this excerpt from the presentation.
There will be more turbulent pockets in the atmosphere, especially at altitudes of 26,000 feet and higher, where most planes fly. These air pockets are already breaking through to the ground, and the time will come when there will be so many such pockets that flying and sailing will be impossible. If you take off, it's not certain that you'll land safely, and it will be very risky. It's scary, but we have to talk about it. We are obliged to warn people. Unfortunately, in the consumerist format of society where human life is worth nothing, such anomalies are not properly studied, and moreover, they will be hidden to the public until the last moment so as not to cause panic and not to lose profit. How many airlines do you think will want to make a statement that flying is now dangerous? You know the answer yourself. Let's summarize. Due to a disruption in the Earth's core caused by external cosmic impact, the magnetic field of our planet undergoes catastrophic changes. Anomalous auroras, light pillars, atmospheric overturns, turbulence anomalies, zones of extreme decrease in air and water density are observed. There are also areas of magnetic anomalies where living organisms and people are dying. And if the overall destabilization of the magnetic field is related to the disruption of the core in general, then local migrating zones of magnetic anomalies have an even more detailed explanation. These anomalies are formed by sudden bursts of electromagnetic energy from the planet's interior. And these bursts occur as a result of cavitation explosions of magma in the interior of our planet. Due to the destabilization of the core, such explosions occur more and more frequently, which means that soon we will observe not only intensification of the above-mentioned anomalies, but also a huge amount of lightning striking from the Earth's surface and an increase in the number of ball lightning. All the facts you have heard today about the changes in the electromagnetic field indicate that our core is already extremely unstable, and that means that our planet is currently following the worst scenario of the cycle of climate catastrophes.
I want to emphasize that atmospheric heating certainly plays a role in intensifying turbulence and jet streams. However, as you now understand, there is an additional factor contributing to the emergence of clear air turbulence: electromagnetic anomalies linked to processes occurring deep within the Earth. These are processes that continue to escalate exponentially. No matter how much you may wish to hear comforting reassurances, I must speak the truth, however harsh or frightening it may be. Based on our mathematical modeling and forecast of ongoing geodynamic trends, I can identify the time period in which the final flight in human history will take place. And I say this with full responsibility. I'm not referring to a specific date, but rather a quarter within a given year, with an approximate margin of error of 3 months. 2 years ago, we publicly warned of the growing turbulence. We knew what was truly happening, and what we are now witnessing is merely a consequence of these processes. Moreover, the situation will only continue to worsen with each passing year. If humanity fails to take decisive action, the time will come within the foreseeable future when neither airplanes nor helicopters will be able to lift off the ground. Global air travel as we know it today will cease to exist. However, there is an alternative. In order to sustain air transportation, humanity will need to return to airship technology. This method of flight will remain viable far longer under changing atmospheric conditions. If you recall our earlier forecast and warnings, you will begin to grasp the true nature of the processes now unfolding. To help you better understand what is currently happening on the planet, let me briefly remind you of the essence of these processes. Earth's atmosphere is an extraordinarily complex dynamic system in which energy is constantly accumulated, transformed, and released through a variety of physical mechanisms. The surge in extreme weather events observed over recent decades points to fundamental shifts in the atmosphere's energy balance. It is now accumulating energy rather than releasing it. The energetic processes within the atmosphere form an intricate web of interconnected physical, geological, and electromagnetic phenomena. At this moment during the 12,000-year disaster cycle, we are witnessing exponential accumulation of various forms of energy in Earth's atmosphere through numerous mechanisms. The trigger for this chain of events is the arrival of an external cosmic influence at the Earth's inner core, which initiates a cascade of energetic processes across all layers of the planet. The core itself, heated by this external cosmic influence, releases colossal volumes of thermal energy. This energy melts the mantle, which in turn transfers heat to the Earth's crust. Additionally, instability in the core leads to fluctuations in Earth's rotational speed. Simultaneously, changes within the core generate electromagnetic disturbances that propagate throughout the planet, affecting the ionosphere. These disturbances in the magnetic field create additional kinetic energy in the form of altered atmospheric circulation. Put simply, when fluctuations begin in the Earth's magnetic field, they affect the motion and behavior of particles in the upper atmosphere. These changes cascade downward to the weather-bearing layers, where they can intensify winds, influence cyclone formation, and even disrupt established climate patterns. However, atmospheric effects are merely the tip of the iceberg. Disturbances in the magnetic field reflect far deeper processes taking place within the planet. The rising energy in the outer core directly affects mantle geodynamics, causing it to melt more intensely. The melting of mantle material leads to deep focus earthquakes. We have spoken about this phenomenon many times before, but let me remind you once again. Deep focus earthquakes occur at depths ranging from 300 to 750 kilometers beneath Earth's surface. At such depths, earthquakes should not be occurring because the material of the inner mantle exists under extreme pressure and high temperatures. Under these conditions, mantle material is expected to deform plastically rather than fracture, and therefore should not generate seismic events. Nevertheless, such earthquakes are regularly recorded, and until recently, their underlying mechanism remained unclear to scientists. According to the hypothesis proposed by Alatra scientists, deep focus earthquakes are powerful intramantle explosions, comparable in strength to the simultaneous detonation of multiple atomic bombs within Earth's mantle. Moreover, deep focus earthquakes often serve as triggers for strong crustal earthquakes, amplifying their destructive impact. The fact that the frequency of deep focus earthquakes is increasing exponentially indicates that energy is accumulating deep within the Earth and that mantle melting is intensifying. The danger of such processes lies not only in the earthquakes themselves, but in the vast amounts of energy released in the process. These intramantle explosions convert mechanical energy into thermal and electrical energy, generating powerful electromagnetic pulses. These pulses propagate through the Earth's layers and reach all the way to the atmosphere, causing disturbances in the magnetic field and redistributing electrical charges. As the mantle heats up and fluctuation in Earth's rotational speed occur, molten magma begins to rise toward the crust. Like an overheated liquid, it expands and seeks an outlet through fractures in the crust. On the surface, this manifests as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, which in turn discharge energy directly into the atmosphere. Megathrust earthquakes, such as the Kamchatka event with a magnitude of 8.8, release enormous amounts of energy that have accumulated in the lithosphere over decades or even centuries of geological stress. The energetic potential of such a catastrophic event is measured in petajoules, equivalent to the detonation of several tens of thousands of nuclear bombs, comparable in power to those dropped on Hiroshima. This energy is not only expressed in seismic waves traveling through the Earth's crust, but is also converted into kinetic energy of tectonic plate motion, potential energy from rock deformation, thermal energy from fault friction, and acoustic energy propagating through the atmosphere. And as a result of these mechanical interactions, an immense amount of energy is released in the form of static electricity. It is critical to understand this. Why? That will become clear to you shortly. Following the magnitude 8.8 mega earthquake, several volcanoes in Kamchatka became active, releasing ash columns into the atmosphere, reaching altitudes of 6 kilometers. Volcanic eruptions release vast amounts of thermal energy and generate powerful convective flows, kinetic energy that fuels atmospheric motion. Volcanic eruptions also generate colossal electrical potential. This is pure electromagnetic energy that directly influences atmospheric processes. Research shows that ash clouds from major eruptions can produce millions of volts of electrical potential, creating conditions for powerful discharges in the atmosphere. For example, the eruption of the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai volcano on January 15, 2022, produced the most intense lightning storm ever recorded. It lasted for approximately 11 hours and spanned 240 kilometers. Researchers found that at its peak, the storm produced a record 2,600 lightning strikes per minute, with a total of around 192,000 strikes observed. Moreover, they discovered that this storm occurred at an unprecedented altitude, between 20 and 30 kilometers, higher than any lightning previously recorded. Today, volcanic activity is relentlessly increasing in other regions of the world as well. This trend is confirmed by a chart showing the cumulative number of eruption days for nearly 300 volcanoes across the planet. You can now see this chart on your screen. It is based on open data from the Smithsonian Institution's Global Volcanism Program. And if we examine the data by individual regions, the graphs become even more revealing. In the Adrian region, 27 volcanoes. In East Africa, 12 volcanoes. There has been a steady increase in activity, especially over the past 20 years. A marked rise in volcanic activity has also been observed in the Sunda Banda Arc region, 39 volcanoes, of Southeast Asia, and in Northwest Pacific region, 56 volcanoes, particularly in recent years. Without question, the most potent manifestation of magmatic activity is the Siberian magma plume, located in Russia, which I mention in every one of my addresses. This is a massive stream of superheated magma rising from the Earth's interior towards the crust, spreading beneath the territory of Siberia and covering an area roughly the same size as the Australian continent. The evolution of the Siberian mantle plume represents an immense source of thermal energy. The plume's heat generates colossal convective flows within the mantle, which influence tectonic processes throughout the entire region. The energy of the plume manifests in several ways. First, through direct heating of the Earth's crust and thermal influence on the near-surface layers. Second, through the generation of kinetic energy as a result of changes in tectonic stress and atmospheric flows. Third, through the creation of electromagnetic anomalies caused by changes in the conductivity of rocks as they are heated. Another colossal source of energy is the ocean. Magmatic processes beneath the oceanic crust lead to the heating of ocean waters, creating an additional reservoir of thermal energy. In the past, this excess heat was relatively quickly transferred to the atmosphere and then released into space, providing a natural cooling mechanism for the world ocean. However, whereas previously this heat escaped through the atmosphere into space, today a critical factor in the ocean's energy accumulation is the contamination of ocean waters with micro and nanoplastic. Plastic particles act as a thermal insulating layer, obstructing normal heat exchange between the ocean and the atmosphere. In effect, the ocean is no longer releasing heat outward. It begins to retain it internally. This leads to the accumulation of thermal energy in ocean waters, alters evaporation patterns, and consequently increases the kinetic energy of atmospheric circulation. This process accelerates ocean heating and disrupts the planet's natural cooling mechanisms. The increase in energy within Earth's atmosphere is expressed through both rising kinetic and potential energy. Kinetic energy in the atmosphere is directly related to the movement of air masses. It is the energy of winds, cyclones, hurricanes, and other dynamic systems. The faster the air moves, the greater the kinetic energy. Potential energy, in turn, is stored in the vertical position of air masses and in the latent heat associated with water's phase transitions. When this energy balance is disrupted, it produces unprecedented weather anomalies across the globe. And that is precisely what we are witnessing today. Precipitation is becoming extreme. Entire annual norms fall within hours, appearing in historically arid regions while droughts simultaneously intensify elsewhere. Tropical cyclones are explosively strengthening into record-breaking categories, far surpassing their historical counterparts in intensity. Temperature anomalies linger over regions for unnatural lengths of time, creating extreme heat waves. We are seeing abrupt temperature fluctuations, winters with spring-like warmth, and paradoxical heat distribution, such as scorching temperatures above the Arctic Circle alongside anomalous cold farther south. Wind regimes are undergoing transformation. Sudden hurricane-force gusts are now emerging in atypical regions, and extratropical cyclones are rapidly gaining destructive power. Tornadoes are multiplying, expanding their geographic reach, and breaking traditional seasonal patterns. However, it is not only kinetic and potential energy that is increasing in the atmosphere. The volume of electrical energy is also growing, and this exerts a significant influence on the planet's systemic stability. This process is especially evident in the Arctic. There, under cold and dry climatic conditions, lightning activity should remain relatively stable, even with rising temperatures. However, actual data show the opposite. The number of lightning strikes north of 65 degrees latitude rose from approximately 18,000 in 2010 to over 150,000 in 2020, an almost tenfold increase. This indicates a substantial buildup of energy within the atmosphere, with far-reaching implications for Earth's climate system. Overall, the global distribution of lightning activity is uneven. Some regions are experiencing an increase in both the number and intensity of lightning strikes, while others are seeing a decline. It is imperative to note that in drought-stricken areas, the number of discharges decreases. This is due to changes in atmospheric density and the influence of wind patterns. It is essential to understand that a warmer atmosphere can retain significantly more moisture and transport it over longer distances. This leads to a paradoxical phenomenon. With a general rise in both temperature and humidity, some areas experience increased precipitation while others face intensified drought. In arid regions, declining humidity reduces the likelihood of lightning formation, even though the total amount of electrical energy in the atmosphere continues to grow. Research conducted by our colleague, a specialist at the Earth Research Analytical Department of ALLATRA, John Ahn, based on National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration data from the United States, shows that the kinetic energy of moderate and strong tornadoes in the U.S. has been growing exponentially in recent decades, along with an increase in their average frequency. This indicates a rise in the atmosphere's kinetic energy, which is a direct consequence of increased potential energy and a clear sign of disruption in the planet's natural energy balance. Logic would suggest that under current conditions, The opposite should be happening. The weakening of Earth's electromagnetic field should have led to a reduction in atmospheric charge. At the same time, the ocean, now absorbing more heat due to plastic accumulation, should be transferring less energy into the atmosphere. Together, these factors should have resulted in a decrease in total atmospheric energy. However, what we are witnessing is the exact opposite, a rise in energy. This can only occur if some kind of accumulator, a capacitor of energy, has appeared in the atmosphere. And that capacitor turns out to be nanoplastic, which exhibits the electret effect, that is, the ability to accumulate and retain electric charge. I will elaborate on this in greater detail shortly. The process by which thermal energy once flowed from the Earth's interior into the ocean, then into the atmosphere, and finally into space, used to function with clockwork precision. But now that process is disrupted. Even though the atmosphere has become less dense due to electromagnetic field weakening, which in theory should facilitate faster cooling, its temperature continues to rise. Energy that should have been radiated into space is now trapped within the atmosphere. The buildup of charge in the atmosphere affects Earth's electromagnetic field, which in turn influences the planet's core. The elevated core temperature heats the magma, erodes the mantle, and generates magmatic countercurrents. This accelerates geophysical processes. The cycle closes in on itself. Each process amplifies the next. Thus, nanoplastic has become the factor disrupting the planet's protective mechanisms. Mechanisms that had functioned for millions of years. It accumulates vast amounts of energy in the atmosphere, obstructs its natural release into space, and causes that energy to circulate within Earth's system, intensifying all adverse processes. The observed trends indicate that the process of energy accumulation in the atmosphere is continuing to accelerate, with anomalies becoming more pronounced each year. Traditional meteorological forecasting models are no longer functioning under these new conditions. The exponential curve of cataclysms is steepening. Each passing year brings increasingly extreme events. Of particular concern are lightning discharges, whose activity is projected to surge dramatically in the near future. Their characteristics will become increasingly dangerous due to the growing overall energy potential of the atmosphere. Even now, the energy accumulation within the core mantle atmosphere system has reached critical levels. These transformations in the atmosphere are part of a broader process of planetary change driven by the 12,000-year disaster cycle, in which the conversion of potential energy into kinetic energy occurs at an accelerated pace, creating cascading effects throughout the climate system. As the diagram shows, we are witnessing a convergence of processes that are currently disrupting the planet's geodynamic and ecological systems. As you already know, the excess energy produced by Earth's core was once gradually released from the planet. Initially, it was partially dissipated through the ocean, then carried into the atmosphere, and eventually radiated into space. This step-by-step process ensured that excess energy did not remain trapped within Earth's interior or atmosphere, but instead escaped the planet, relieving pressure on its internal layers. However, this natural mechanism is now broken. Nanoplastic does not merely add to the existing environmental challenges. It is the primary factor disrupting the planet's natural energy balance. If it were not for plastic, the ocean would effectively discharge excess energy. That energy would not be lingering in the atmosphere, and we would not be facing the threat of a Siberian plume eruption, the activation of supervolcanoes, or other grave consequences that now await us. You are already aware of how plastic in the ocean hinders the release of excess energy. But the situation in the atmosphere is even more alarming. The accumulation of microplastics and nanoplastics in both the ocean and the atmosphere is causing more and more energy to remain trapped within the Earth's system, becoming the driving force behind the increasing frequency and intensity of natural disasters. It is important to understand that nanoplastic poses a danger to us, not only as a climate disrupting factor, but first and foremost as a threat to life itself within the biosphere, including the species Homo sapiens. This is a catastrophe of humanity's own making. Without nanoplastic, we would have passed through the current climate cycle just as we had in previous ones, experiencing a degree of natural activation, but without facing the threat of a Siberian plume eruption or other severe catastrophes capable of bringing our own existence to an absolute end. Today, the amount of micro and nanoplastic in the atmosphere has reached astronomical levels. These are no longer isolated particles. They now constitute a new, permanent component of our atmosphere. Let me remind you that up to 25 million metric tons of plastic particles are transported each year over thousands of kilometers by sea air, ocean spray, snow, and fog, crossing countries, continents, and oceans. And this figure accounts only for the portion of plastic movement that current instruments can roughly detect. When it comes to nanoparticles, scientists still have very little accurate data on their atmospheric concentration simply because modern instruments are not yet capable of detecting and distinguishing them reliably. According to preliminary estimates, the concentration of nanoplastic may be several orders of magnitude higher than that of microplastic, but reported values still range from thousands to millions of particles per cubic meter of air. We are quite literally stewing in a soup of plastic dust. Once exposed to ultraviolet radiation, these particles pose a dual threat. Their surfaces become rougher, allowing them to accumulate heavy metals such as lead and mercury. But the core danger of this plastic lies not in its chemical toxicity, but in its physics. Each of these trillions of particles functions as an electret. What is an electret? Imagine a permanent magnet, but for static electricity. It is a substance that, once charged, holds that charge for weeks. Scientific studies confirm that nanoparticles of polystyrene, PET, and other plastics carry a persistent electrical charge. They become charged from virtually anything: friction in air currents, cosmic rays, lightning discharges. These are trillions of microscopic energy magnets floating in the air. Now let us return to the fundamentals. Earth's atmosphere is a complex electrical system. Benjamin Franklin was the first to recognize that water plays a key role in the system, and Michael Faraday later discovered that electricity rises from the friction of water droplets. Now imagine introducing trillions of microscopic electrical magnets into this finely tuned system, free-floating in the air, clustering together to amplify their charge, and carried by moving air masses. The number of these invisible plastic nanoparticles above our heads is already comparable to the number of stars we see in the night sky. And that is no exaggeration. To help you grasp this, let me offer a simple analogy. Take a single microplastic particle 5 millimeters in diameter and break it down into nanoplastic particles, 1 micrometer in size. You will get 125 billion nanoplastic particles from just one microplastic fragment. That's roughly equal to the number of known galaxies in the universe. And the surface area of these particles would be 5,000 times greater than that of the original 5 millimeter particle. Why? Because when you divide one large sphere into countless smaller ones, the total volume remains unchanged, but the total surface area increases dramatically. And every one of those 125 billion nanoplastic particles carries an electric charge on its surface, injecting chaos into the functioning of our atmosphere. Because of the colossal quantity of charged nanoplastic, our atmosphere has effectively transformed into a giant capacitor. Picture this. The Earth's surface forms one layer of the capacitor, and the ionosphere forms the other. In the past, there was an energy balance between them, but now we have filled the space in between with trillions of charged particles, actively accumulating electric charge. This plastic has turned our atmosphere into a massive energy battery, one that is constantly charging, but, so to speak, can no longer discharge into space. These particles trap heat, preventing it from escaping, and their number continues to grow. The energy they accumulate does not disappear. It seeks a way out, and it finds that outlet through extreme weather events, which are becoming increasingly frequent, intense, and destructive. Just as a plastic film on the surface of the ocean prevents heat from escaping from Earth's interior, this electrified blanket in the atmosphere prevents the planet's excess energy from radiating into space. That energy remains here, and it is boiling our atmosphere from within. What are we witnessing as a result? A fundamental transformation of cloud systems. Plastic particles do not behave like ordinary condensation nuclei. They act as super efficient attractors, drawing in water droplets far more effectively than natural particles. As a result, clouds begin forming at lower altitudes, below 2 kilometers. These low, dense clouds are less mobile, disrupting normal precipitation patterns. Drought in some regions, catastrophic downpours in others. Destructive rainfall. These newly formed clouds retain more moisture, delay the onset of precipitation. But when rain finally begins, it falls with far greater intensity, as an abnormal volume of moisture has had time to accumulate within the clouds. Moreover, research has shown that water droplets containing microplastics freeze at temperatures 4 to 10 degrees Celsius higher than clean droplets, that is, at lower altitudes. This leads to the formation of unusually large ice crystals and consequently to an increase in hailstone size. And of course, anomalous thunderstorms. Elevated concentrations of charged aerosols intensify the electrification of clouds. We already have direct evidence. The increase in lightning strikes across the northwestern part of South America has been linked by scientists specifically to rising aerosol levels in the atmosphere. And the most terrifying part is, this process is self-sustaining. It's a perfect storm that has created a closed loop. Ocean warming accelerates the water evaporation. With the vapor, even more nanoplastic rises into the air. The atmosphere becomes even more charged. More energy gets trapped, further heating the ocean. We know that according to modeling data, for every degree of warming, air humidity increases by 7%, and lightning frequency rises by at least 12%. More heat, more moisture, more plastic in the air, more lightning, and so on endlessly. With each turn, the spiral of this catastrophe tightens. This means that the more micro and nanoplastic in the system, the lower humanity's chances of survival. And this is not all. Charged micro and nanoplastic in the atmosphere is now affecting aviation. Due to changes in cloud formation and abnormal atmospheric phenomena, flight safety is increasingly at risk, especially in turbulent and cold layers of the atmosphere. Not to mention that airborne particles, when interacting with aircraft surfaces, accumulate charge and can cause interference with communication and navigation systems. Overall, the influence of nanoplastic on flight safety remains underestimated, and this issue urgently demands thorough investigation, while we still have time to find solutions. What is especially striking today is the admission by scientists themselves, those studying micro and nanoplastic. Scientists are saying they are afraid because humanity is flying blind, unaware of the full scale of the danger posed by plastic and unable to fully grasp its devastating impact on the biosphere as a whole, and on us in particular. Today, the scientific community is increasingly sounding the alarm over the disturbing rise in sudden deaths, among which micro and nanoplastic are being cited with growing instance as a potential contributing factor. And we warned the public about this many years ago. We stated that cases of sudden mortality would become more frequent and emphasized the urgent need to investigate new health risk factors. Science is only just beginning to grasp the true scale of the threat posed by micro and nanoplastic. For example, recent findings have revealed that the average adult inhales 100 times more plastic particles than previously estimated. However, even these figures pale in comparison to the conclusions presented in a recent report by The Lancet. The global plastic crisis is already costing the world $1.5 trillion annually in deaths and injuries. Micro and nanoplastic are now being found everywhere in the lungs, blood, brain, and placenta, and the true extent of the harm they inflict remains vastly underestimated. Modern science is only beginning to approach these questions, while Alatra warned about them long before the current scientific discoveries. Today, the scientific community is merely confirming what we stated 20 years ago. Even then, our research and analysis pointed to the potential risk associated with plastic nanoparticles, and most importantly, to their surface charge. The connection between the microcosm and global energy shifts reveals the systemic nature of this crisis. What we are facing is not a series of isolated environmental disasters, but a disruption of the fundamental balance of the entire Earth system. This closed loop of energy accumulation in the atmosphere and throughout the planet's entire system must be broken. Today, only the Alatra scientific team offers a concrete proposal for a solution, while others merely describe the problem. Whether our concept is viable and effective remains an open question. I'm not claiming we offer a panacea, and none of us expects someone else to take on the responsibilities for its implementation. Nearly 3 decades ago, when we were all much younger, we were driven by the naive belief that it would be enough to identify the root cause of the problem, point it out, and the world would unite to solve it together. But reality proved to be quite different. We encountered a deeply fragmented world where everyone is consumed by their own concerns, even as we face one common global task that demands collective effort. That task is to relieve the pressure within Earth's magmatic system through the planned degassing of the Siberian plume. This is the one measure that could reduce the strain on all volcanic systems across the globe and ease the pressure of magma against the lithospheric plates. I've come across the claim that we supposedly speak of degassing the Siberian plume as a way to flood Russia with lava and destroy it. But I must say, regrettably, if no one listens to us, the Siberian magma plume will leave nothing behind, not only of Russia's territory, but of human civilization as a whole. As long as people continue to measure everything by self-interest and the size of their wallets, we remain in tremendous danger. Especially now, as it turns out that to the volcanic chaos we must add yet another catastrophic threat, one that functions like a time bomb humanity has placed under itself. namely the electric charge retained on micro and nanoplastic particles. This charge is the key danger. At the global level, not a single effective solution has yet been found. Still, this problem remains entirely unaddressed, even as the amount of micro and nanoplastic in the biosphere continues to grow. And as of now, only the Ustvari scientific team has proposed a working concept. And its core is the search for a method to strip plastic of its ability to retain static charge. In other words, to eliminate the electric effect, which allows plastic particles to accumulate and hold electrical charge on their surfaces. If successful, plastic particles would lose their hazardous properties and become nothing more than inert dust. What is critically important here is this: we are not talking about producing new, safe plastics that won't accumulate charge. We are talking about neutralizing the charge on the plastic that is already in the atmosphere, in the oceans, and most alarmingly, inside our own bodies. To put it plainly, the amount of nano and microplastic already present in the biosphere is sufficient not only to trigger widespread biological system failure, but to wipe life from the face of the planet several times over. That is why simply halting the production of new plastic, as some urgently demand, will do nothing to eliminate the threat of plastic-driven extinction. There is only one path forward: understanding how to neutralize or shield the charge already stored in plastic. Everything else is self-deception and inevitable extinction. And now, at a moment when the world urgently needs to consolidate its scientific potential to address this fundamental global challenge and neutralize the threat, certain individuals who present themselves as scientists categorically deny that micro and nanoplastic pose any real danger. I would like to share another observation, continuing my earlier debate regarding statements made by certain members of the Russian Academy of Sciences. I must admit, my faint hopes for a glimmer of common sense from this syndicate of experts have once again come crashing down. This time I was especially struck by the bottomless absurdity of their arguments, claiming the supposed complete harmlessness of nanoplastic. With deep interest, and I won't hide it, a certain intellectual astonishment, I reviewed several recent statements from the latest cohort of brilliant minds within the Academy on this topic. Their declarations are filled with performative optimism and an unshakable faith in the indestructibility of the human body. According to their assessments, nanoplastic poses no serious threat whatsoever, and all warnings about this harm are supposedly fairy tales, especially if the data in question comes from Western sources. For example, in recent Russian publications devoted to allegedly harmless nanoplastic, the following claim is emphasized: the micro world is only just beginning to be actively studied by the global scientific community, so there is certainly no reason to panic over new eco-friendly research from Western countries. Well then, since reliance on research from Western countries is currently, as always, held in low regard by the Russian Academy of Sciences, which it seems knows better than anyone else, allow me, within the framework of scientific dialogue, to compare some of the Academy's reassuring assertions about nanoplastic with data not from what they consider the ominous Western scientific literature, but from a source they may find far more respectable: the scientific work of their esteemed neighbor, none other than China itself. The most outspoken dismissal of nanoplastic's danger comes from Russian scientist Alexei Hoklov, a full member of the Russian Academy of Sciences and head of the Department of Polymer and Crystal Physics at Moscow State University's Faculty of Physics. He confidently reassures the Russian public with statements such as, and I quote, "The toxicity of micro and nanoplastic particles has not been proven by science. In reality, microplastic particles affect the human body in much the same way as any kind of dust or, for example, sand," end quote. Perhaps Cholakian is unaware, but the global scientific community has already published a substantial body of peer-reviewed studies dedicated explicitly to the toxicity of nanoplastic. For instance, the team led by Professor Zhong Li at China's Southern Medical University recently published findings revealing the molecular mechanism of neurotoxicity caused by micro and nanoplastic exposure. Their research provides solid evidence that nanoplastic can induce neurotoxicity linked to the gut-brain axis. Scientists at Beijing University, in their studies of reproductive toxicity of nanoplastic, found that exposure to micro and nanoplastics derived from polylactic acid causes reproductive toxicity in males, disrupting spermatogenesis and inducing mitochondrial dysfunction in mice. If academician Cholakian remains convinced of nanoplastics' complete harmlessness after all this, one can only admire his unshakable scientific courage, especially considering that some of the documented effects pertain specifically to male health. And in yet another Chinese scientific review, it is stated directly that, and I quote again, "After entering the human body, microplastics can cause cytotoxicity, mitochondrial toxicity, DNA damage, cell membrane damage, and other effects on human cells and organs, leading to serious consequences such as local inflammation, ecological imbalance, metabolic disorders, etc. in various systems," end quote. So then, while Chinese researchers, and indeed the broader global scientific community, have already reached a clear consensus on the toxicity of nanoplastic, is Cholakian, speaking on behalf of the entire Russian Academy of Sciences, still denying it? That raises a serious question. Does he even understand what nano and microplastics are, and more importantly, how they behave inside human cells? Judging by his next statement, it would seem not. Because in it, Cholakian, the chief expert on microplastic in Russia, as he is often referred to in Russian media, claims that plastic does not interact with human body at all. According to one Russian publication, he asserts that plastic supposedly cannot immediately enter cells. Specifically, Cholakian states, and I quote, "When particles enter the body, a cell, or any biological environment, they are immediately coated with surfactants, surface active substances. Therefore, there is no danger," end quote. This statement directly contradicts all modern scientific data. Cholakian refers to surfactants, that is the protein corona, but completely misrepresents its actual function. It does not protect the body. On the contrary, it enables nanoplastic to infiltrate cells. And that is precisely the most critical point, because it is once the nanoplastic enters the cell that it begins its most devastating work, destroying the human body from within. Dozens of studies, including the most recent work by Chinese scientists, make this perfectly clear. The protein corona acts as a molecular disguise. It renders plastic particles invisible to cellular defenses, allowing them to penetrate the cell. But the true danger emerges after that. When the particle comes into contact with the cell membrane, this outer coating disintegrates, exposing the particle itself. Its positive surface charge then triggers what medicine calls cellular apoptosis, a programmed death of the cell from within. The irony is that science has long since proven that protein corona is not a protective layer, but a Trojan horse that allows nanoplastic to infiltrate the human body and disrupt its function at the cellular level. It is especially alarming to hear such statements from someone who presents himself as an expert. I'm beginning to suspect that Professor Kokolov operates within some alternative physico-chemical paradigm, known only to himself, one that radically diverges from the established scientific understanding of the world. Because in addition to his unconventional interpretation of the protein corona's role, he also manages to claim the absolute chemical neutrality of nanoplastics, stating, "Micro and nanoplastic are chemically inert. They do not engage in chemical reactions with biological molecules or tissues within the human body," end quote. So Kokolov seriously claims that nanoplastic exposure supposedly triggers no chemical reactions, no oxidation, no biochemical effects of any kind. That is truly astonishing, especially considering that the global scientific community, including China, whose research Russian academicians still appear to regard with a degree of respect, holds an entirely opposite view. To date, China has published dozens, if not hundreds, of studies dedicated to the subject of oxidative stress caused by the interaction between nanoplastic and living cells. Numerous studies have confirmed that exposure to polystyrene nanoparticles causes cells to produce large quantities of reactive oxygen species. This triggers an oxidative stress response, leading to damage of lipids, proteins, and DNA. Thus, scientific evidence clearly demonstrates that nanoplastic not only actively engages in chemical reactions with biological molecules, but also causes their mutation and degradation. In fact, the actual mechanisms of impact are the exact opposite of those described by Kokolov. It must be said that in yet another statement, Kokolov has truly outdone himself in his freewheeling interpretations of scientific phenomena. At this point, we are no longer dealing with a mere lack of scientific rigor. We are instead witnessing a truly revolutionary approach to disease etiology that borders on the creation of alternative medicine. According to his bold assertion, that detection of microplastic in affected organs does not prove that plastic is the cause of disease. It is more likely that the disease itself disrupts protective barriers, which then leads to the accumulation of particles. So by Kokolov's logic, if that term can even be applied here, plastic does not cause dementia. Instead, dementia disrupts the body's barrier functions and somehow attracts plastic to itself. Meanwhile, researchers in China, publishing in aging research reviews, along with the broader scientific community, have firmly reached the opposite conclusion. Patients with detectable micro and nanoplastics in carotid artery plaques exhibit significantly higher cumulative risk of myocardial infarction, stroke, or mortality, identifying plastic particles as fundamental drivers of cardiovascular disease progression. Chinese researchers unequivocally identify plastic as a fundamental driving factor in the worsening of chronic diseases. While the rest of the rational scientific world agrees with this concern, Russian official experts continue to stubbornly deny the threat of nanoplastic. Why? To discredit the very dangers that ALLATRA has consistently brought to light. But if they are suppressing real scientific research, what are they offering in return? The expert opinions of Kokolov and Vinogradov, and Kokolov is being presented as one of Russia's leading specialists on microplastic. Seriously, is this now the standard of Russia's top scientists? The situation becomes truly dangerous when someone with academic credentials, but without actual expertise in the subject, begins shaping public opinion. His statements, backed by official titles, mislead people into a deadly false sense of security, convincing them that what is killing you is completely harmless. It's like telling people in a burning building, the flames are perfectly safe. Go ahead and sleep. Even more outrageous are remarks from so-called scientists like Vinogradov, who suggest, don't worry about the climate, focus on raising your children instead. Such comments sound more like delusion than any credible scientific stance. Of course, there are real scientists in Russia, those who speak out openly against this pseudoscience. However, the system deliberately gives the microphone only to compliant experts, while ignoring the voices of genuine specialists. Unfortunately, what we're witnessing in the transformation of science in Russia into a tool of propaganda, where truth is suppressed to serve political interest. And in this regard, I'm going to say something that many may not expect from me. Frankly, I didn't expect it myself, at least not as an American citizen. But right now, I am not speaking as an American, and not even as just an ordinary, reasonable human being. At this moment, I am speaking as a scientist. And a scientist, if he genuinely is a scientist, must be impartial and apolitical, guided solely by facts. That is what distinguishes a genuine researcher from a pretender. And as a scientist, I tip my hat to my Chinese colleagues. Unlike certain representatives of the Russian Academy of Sciences who managed to deny even the most obvious harms of nanoplastic, Chinese researchers today are demonstrating a serious, brilliantly structured scientific approach to the problem of nanoplastic. Every month, China produces dozens of foundational studies on this issue. Therefore, I want to express my sincere gratitude to the Communist Party of China and to President Xi Jinping personally for supporting research into nanoplastic and for the remarkable scientific work being carried out by Chinese researchers. These studies are invaluable. They are truly vital for all humanity, for Americans, for Chinese citizens, and yes, even for Russians. I am duty-bound to acknowledge facts, no matter how inconvenient they may be. Otherwise, I would be no different from Vinogradov. And to become like Vinogradov, well, that is something I would very much prefer to avoid. While the rational scientific world recognizes the danger of nanoplastic, perhaps not yet fully grasping the scale of the threat, but at least acknowledging its existence, Russia, in contrast, openly denies the problem altogether. This approach is increasingly becoming the signature style of the Russian academic establishment. Systematic suppression of threats, whether nanoplastic or the Siberian plume, all to avoid admitting the obvious, that the scientists of Allatra were correct in their forecast. Everything is done to ensure the Russian public never learns the truth or begins asking uncomfortable questions. The reason is simple. Acknowledging these threats, whether from the Siberian plume or from nanoplastic, would bring inevitable reputational and economic losses to those who control the country's key resources. Admitting the scale of the threat posed by the Siberian plume would shatter the carefully constructed illusion of stability presented to the outside world, an illusion upon which Russia's image is as a reliable partner and target for international investment depends. After all, who would invest in a region perched on the edge of a potential geological catastrophe? Furthermore, Russian institutions genuinely fear that once the truth becomes known to the broader public, mass migration will begin from high-risk regions. This would deal a severe blow to the domestic economy and, by extension, to the personal wealth of the ruling elite. To prevent these losses and maintain control, the authorities have chosen a strategy of repression, operating under the principle, silence the inconvenient truth and destroy those who speak it. To achieve this, those seeking to preserve their capital employ convenient mercenaries such as Alexander Dvorkin. He is a Russian cult expert and so-called extremism specialist, operating through his totalitarian organization, Rezultirati, the Russian Association of Centers for Religious and Sex Studies. Dvorkin and his structure are notorious for carrying out this kind of dirty work in the past, discrediting innocent people and organizations for a fee. Today, Rezultirati, which now wields transnational influence, is actively coordinating the spread of disinformation about *Ustvari and its volunteers. In essence, the propaganda machine of lies manufactured and unleashed by Dvorkin is no longer confined to the Russian public. It has crossed borders, infiltrating even some democratic nations. Their goal is simple: not merely to destroy the reputation of *Ustvari and its participants, but to force society to reject even the scientific facts about environmental and geodynamic risk that the movement has publicly raised. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are witnessing is a full-scale systemic cognitive war, one designed to make you doubt the very threats we are warning you about. As a result, large-scale repressions have been launched in Russia against law-abiding participants of *Ustvari. Today, many of them are being brutally persecuted. Some are under investigation, while others have already been thrown into prison. What is especially cynical is that the influence of Rezultirati, despite being a Russian organization, has now spread into Ukraine, where at the initiative of Dvorkin's agents, criminal cases have been opened against participants of the movement, built on deliberately falsified expert assessments. Just think about it. Upstanding citizens who have devoted themselves to science, public education, and socially meaningful initiatives in the name of human life are now facing violations of their fundamental rights, intimidation, and attempts at total isolation. And all of this simply because a handful of individuals are trying to protect their wealth and power by suppressing truth that could save the lives of billions. All of us on this planet could perish in an instant because of the cowardice and greed of people who have neither honor nor conscience. These are the very individuals who are deliberately hiding from society an immense body of scientific knowledge and solutions, knowledge that *Ustvari represents. 20 years ago, the interdisciplinary team of scientists at *Ustvari conducted foundational research into the properties of nanoplastic, research that remains unprecedented in its scale. Even then, key characteristics were identified. Nanoplastic particles exhibit a unique ability to accumulate electrostatic charge, which triggers a cascade of hazardous biochemical reactions within biological systems. These early studies pointed to nanoplastic as a critical aggravating factor in the destabilization of atmospheric processes, the progressive warming of the oceans, and the intensification of geodynamic changes. Only now is modern science beginning to grasp the full scale of the nanoplastic threat, one that *Ustvari scientists were the first to identify, and whose pioneering approach catalyzed the international wave of research developments we are witnessing today. Yet *Ustvari's contribution did not end with diagnosing the problem. The scientific team has actively developed and continues to develop practical solutions to countering the threat posed by nanoplastic. One such strategic direction proposed by the Ustvari scientific group is the development of methods to neutralize or shield the electrostatic charge of nanoplastic, one of the primary factors behind its toxicity. According to Alatra's estimates, shielding or neutralizing this electrostatic charge could reduce nanoplastic's potential harm by at least 50%. Alatra scientists have been engaged in this work for over 20 years, and I can say with full confidence, during that time, we have explored dozens of directions, ideas, and potential strategies for countering the nanoplastic threat. Today, we can state with certainty it is impossible to completely cleanse living systems of nanoplastic. Total elimination is not achievable. We have analyzed an enormous range of potential strategies and can categorically assert no form of filtration system solves the problem at the molecular level. Chemical neutralizers of nanoplastics only increase its toxicity. Atmospheric water generators, which might have been a viable solution 20 years ago, are no longer effective. That opportunity has been lost. All other existing cleanup methods either produce adverse effects or have no measurable effect at all. The only effective path forward is to deprive nanoplastic of its electric properties. In other words, we must find a way to alter its fundamental characteristics, to develop a scientifically grounded method that strips nanoplastic of its ability to accumulate and retain electrostatic charge over time. This is the key. Any alternative approach is a futile waste of critical, important resources, energy, and above all, time. If we fail to find this solution, we as a civilization will lose, and every individual will bear the consequences. If we do not succeed, the consequences will be severe and inevitable. You are witnessing this with your own eyes. Powerful earthquakes are leveling buildings. Winds of unprecedented force are tearing roofs off homes. Massive floods are washing away streets and entire cities. Crops are failing. Food prices are rising and migration is accelerating. Many of you have already experienced firsthand what it's like to be at the epicenter of the very climate disasters we warned about a decade ago. You now see and feel everything we tried to warn you about. And now you understand and have seen with your own eyes, Alatra was right in its forecast. And all the persecution, repression, and smear campaigns against Alatra were aimed at one thing: to prevent you from hearing us, to keep you from believing in the reality of the exponential rise in earthquakes, in the threat of the Siberian plume, and in the danger of nanoplastic. If in the past you had only heard about these dangers, today you are becoming witnesses to their devastating consequences and the fulfillment of our forecast. In the face of these existential threats, I hope you now understand what Alatra has truly been doing and continues to do, why its work is invaluable, what scale of problems Alatra scientists are tackling, having begun 30 years ago to study what science is only now beginning to confront. It is thanks to those decades of research that we already understand how to stabilize the climate. However, there is one absolute condition. Without solving the problem of nanoplastic, no other measures will be sufficient. All climate and geodynamic processes today have merged into a single self-reinforcing mechanism, one that cannot be halted by outdated methods. It is moving in only one direction, and that direction is against humanity. That is why this crisis demands urgent, systemic, and decisive action. However, if you believe that simply identifying the problem will cause the global scientific community to immediately begin solving it, you are mistaken. The experience of Alatra's research makes this abundantly clear. You can see how difficult it is to break through the wall of silence, resistance, and even deliberate discrediting, simply for stepping beyond the conventional paradigms, even when acting solely in the interest of humanity and our collective future. This is precisely why, now more than ever, mass public participation and widespread information outreach are essential. There must be a strong public demand for the allocation of grants and funding for nanoplastic research across the globe, with one overriding priority: to find a way to neutralize its electrostatic charge. Only if every person takes an active role in raising awareness and generating public demand, understanding the urgency and importance of the issue, will a real solution become possible. This is why I am reaching out to you now, and this is why I have dedicated today's address to this subject. Why is it so important to share this with everyone? Your family, your loved ones, your friends, and colleagues. Why must we not remain silent? Because this affects everyone, regardless of profession, beliefs, or place of residence. No one will be able to stand aside. We are speaking about the question of life on this planet, and every person has the right to know the truth. Today, only public opinion has the power to influence the direction of scientific research. Why? Because a group of madmen in Russia who have seized power are actively denying everything Allatra has stated. They are willing to sacrifice human lives just to avoid admitting that Allatra was right. And even if Allatra were to declare that the sun rises, they would deny that too. They would fabricate facts, falsify data, and parade their experts onto the stage to convince the public that the sun does not rise and that it doesn't exist at all. And they would continue doing so until the planet collapses beneath our feet. This is a group of deranged individuals fighting against truth, even at the cost of destroying the world. And for what? To protect their own security and preserve their power. That is why, now more than ever, we must activate civil society's efforts. Public demand is the only way to secure real funding for science aimed at solving the central threat, the neutralization of nanoplastic. Whether or not you support Allatra is irrelevant. What matters now is one thing: the survival of humanity. The more people learn the truth, the more widely it is shared, the faster the scientific community will be able to begin a real, not superficial, but truly effective search for solutions. Today, I've tried to present this information as gently as possible, not to instill fear or confusion, but to foster understanding. This is not a time for fear. It is a time for action, for the sake of humanity and our shared future. No one will be able to sit this out. By now, it's become clear to all. The Allatra Research Group issues its warnings with full justification. The scientific models and frameworks that the global community has relied on for decades are steadily losing their relevance. They are no longer capable of explaining the unfolding reality. In contrast, the only model that has proven its validity amid this rapidly escalating crisis is the Allatra model. And that is now becoming evident to everyone. Its significance today cannot be overstated. The catastrophic scenarios we warned about are no longer theoretical. They are beginning to unfold before our eyes. And these are not challenges for some distant future generation. They are challenges we ourselves must face. The point is quite simple. To preserve our tomorrow, we must act today. People must understand the root causes of what is happening. They must know what lies ahead, and what they must fully recognize what must be done right now if we are to have any chance of securing a future, not only for generations to come, but for ourselves as well. Life is worth fighting for.